My name is David Brown. I have a blog called The Trini Troodon, and I am a self-published author, though I've been active for a while. And I'm doing this video as a very late tie-in to an ebook I published last year called Revenge of the Revenant Review about zombie movies. And specifically, I was trying to look at the strange and obscure zombie movies. So, what I'll be talking about is what I would consider the best of the mid tier zombie movies. And the way I would define that, first of all, is movies that people who aren't genre fans might not have heard of. Also, usually fairly low budget movies. And there's also a certain kind of vibe. A lot of these are independent, and also a lot of them are not that closely tied into the main zombie concepts, especially the idea of zombies multiplying and also just being subhuman. What we'll see is that a lot of these will have zombies that are a lot different, often a lot smarter and more capable. And they can also have the idea of zombies being controlled, which is actually going back to the more authentic Haitian folklore. So, to dig right in, I will be doing these in chronological order rather than trying to rank them. This is just about the first zombie movie that's mid-tier but still significant. It's called The Earth Dies Screaming. It's a British movie from the early 1960s, and this is really just about the first movie to portray a zombie apocalypse. Now, the zombies don't actually destroy civilization. What actually happens is that an alien attack kills off almost all the humans, but you have a few survivors, and then the aliens bring the zombies back to life to hunt them. And if you can adjust for how the production values are and really the acting and filmmaking style, it's a very serious film. Certainly, it's pretty hard hitting for themes, and it is well acted. I think one of the best scenes is a guy who gathers a whole bunch of money and just starts throwing it in the fire. Uh, and that's the kind of themes you get with this. It's a very serious take on the apocalypse. It almost makes the zombies secondary, or you could argue that it does. There is also an alien robot or two wandering around that get destroyed. But the zombies themselves, they are also done very seriously. And what's most interesting, since they're supposed to be recently dead, it's even implied that they aren't even technically dead. They aren't decayed. They just have these really strange eyes. I remembered it as glowing eyes from the very first time I saw it. It's really more like a metallic sheen, which they probably did with contacts, which was common, and it was horribly painful. And what's creepy about them is that they aren't cannibalistic. They aren't even that violent. They will just move around. The first one or two of them just seem to observe the survivors. Then some of them start attacking, and even then, they don't attack in mass. They just mainly ambush, try to get one or two survivors alone. And that is definitely different than the usual zombie apocalypse, and it's very effective. So if you can find this one, it's definitely worth watching. And Some of these I really don't have, and when I don't have a zombie movie I like, it usually means it's really, really hard to get. So I'll mention one that is like that called Invasion of the Dead. It's from an actual genre or subgenre of the Mexican wrestling mass wrestler horror movie. Mexican wrestling, Mexican wrestler, whatever you call it. Uh, there were a whole lot of movies like this. This was actually relatively late. I would say 73. I might have to double check that. And they had two guys. One was named Santo. The other was really more of a stuntman than a wrestler. And the weird thing with the production is they filmed it partway through with the stuntman, but then he died, not actually during the film, doing something unrelated. So to finish out the film, they just put in more footage, including stuff with the other guy. With this, it's very strange, and it's harder to argue than with the British films that it was serious. But still, the zombies themselves are pretty intelligent. They're openly hostile, but they don't necessarily show them explicitly cannibalistic, and that really makes them seem more calculating. You get that with a lot of these. And the weirdest thing is they will hijack vehicles. At one point, one of them gets in a helicopter and just starts flying around. It doesn't even do that much, but just seeing a zombie able to handle a vehicle is, let's say, disconcerting. So that's one that's worth watching if you can get it. Whether you can get it with English, either English dub or English subtitles, is the big what if. What I've done with at least one other of these movies is actually watching it just with the Spanish subtitles. I did learn a lot of Spanish a long time ago, and usually then I can follow along if I'm able to read the Spanish. So if you can get into it, that's another one that's worthwhile. And here's one I have that was hard to find for a long time. It's gotten a lot easier. And the big problem was the title. Here you see it under the title Death Dream. The real title of the movie is Dead of Night, which was the same as the TV movie that came a bit later. So that threw off the trail. It threw me off for a while. But the plot of this movie is that it's a pretty much explicit adaptation of The Monkey's Paw. So there's a veteran who's killed in Vietnam. His mother wishes for him to come home, so he comes home, initially actually acting like himself, but then you see that he's undead and he needs blood to stay alive. So it's it's what I would call a character zombie movie, though it doesn't fill out some of the criteria I have. I think I consider the big thing with character zombie movies that you either see them before they were dead or know something about what they were like when they're alive, and then as a zombie, they are a developed character and they retain some kind of a human personality. And what you see with this one is that you can have that and still have an extremely disturbing movie. And I think disturbing is the key thing. For me, I don't really care about what people consider scary in a movie, like things that make you jump. that I think usually doesn't even connect with me, and it's not to me a big part of what makes a horror movie interesting. What I like is something that's intellectually disturbing, and this is right up there. And one other thing I'll mention about that, it was made by a guy named Bob Clark, uh, who became the director of some major horror movies. As the most famous is Black Christmas, and he directed A Christmas Story, the 80s movie. So it's really almost mainstream, and they got some pretty big talent. The biggest name was John Marley, who was in The Godfather, is the father of the undead character. And the whole thing is domestic tension. It gets by the end where you can tell everyone knows or suspects that he's undead and dangerous, but they're still not willing to do anything about it. And that leads into a very effective closing. If there's anything that doesn't quite work, it's the ending, which I'm not going to spoil. Even that, it makes sense and it fits the story, so you really can't argue. And another one I'll mention that I don't have here is Dead and Buried. That's one I've seen, but I've never gotten. That is from 1981. And the big thing about that, they got the writers from Alien, Ron Shusett and Dan O'Bannon. O'Bannon later said he didn't really contribute much to the script. He just gave a few ideas to Ron Shusett that weren't used. And the whole setup is that there's an entire town full of zombies that are created by an undertaker, and they're actually living normal lives, except once in a while they will attack someone, and then the people they kill get turned into more of the townspeople. And it goes to what's supposed to be a twist ending that's pretty easy to see coming. It's still very well done. It's another one that's almost mainstream, and the biggest indicator of that is that they actually got Stan Winston. He was not big then, but he went on to do work in Aliens, Predator, Jurassic Park. So obviously they have very good zombie makeup. Though what's most effective about it is that there isn't that much. The whole point is that the zombies look like normal humans. The big effect is that there's one scene where an arm gets detached. You can kind of see pretty clearly that it is an effects rig, but it's still convincing. The hand itself looks like a real hand, and it would have been at least partly a real hand. Uh, and just that one shot is very effective. Then it's almost a gag. The zombie that lost the arm just grabs the arm and runs away. And that really gets to the concept of these creatures. Now, the next one I'm going to do is Soul Survivor. This I have my own video about, so I'm not going to talk a lot about it. It's another one by a guy who kind of went mainstream. His name is Tom Eberhardt. He went on to do some mainstream movies, though what he's best known for now is probably Night of the Comet, which is also kind of a zombie movie, except not quite undead. But with this, uh, people remember it as like Final Destination with zombies. And there's arguments, of course, Final Destination came later. Uh, I think probably they arrived at that independently. You can find other horror movies and stories with similar ideas, or even science fiction. So with this, there's a woman who survives a plane crash, and the dead start coming back to life to hunt her, and uh, it's very clear they're out to kill her, and they're also willing to kill anyone who gets in their way. With this, it's really an experimental film, and the experiment is it's all atmosphere. So, if what you want in horror is a lot of jump scares, you aren't going to get that, though there are some very good ones in here. They're just very spread out. But the big thing is that it's really urban horror. It will show the city, and it's almost uh, depressingly, well, it is really depressingly normal. And then when you do see the undead moving around, they are so much like normal people that almost everyone ignores them, which is a really creepy idea if you think about it. And the other thing is that these are maybe the most low tech zombies outside of things from the 60s and earlier, and they're much more effective for it. I'll show you one of them here on the back of this DVD, which is hell to get now, though they do have some recent Blu-ray releases. And it's really kind of a Lovecraftian movie. It's the whole idea is that you have a cosmic force, and if the cosmic force wants you dead, you are going to die. And that's really not even much of a spoiler to say that. Uh, but again, the whole thing is the atmosphere and just how creepy the undead are. And there's another one I'm going to cover briefly here because I did have it on hand. I could have left it out. This is called Dead Heat. It's a zombie parody from a cycle of movies like that. This is one more that's almost mainstream. They had Treat Williams, who died recently, so RIP, and Joe Piscopo. I understand he was originally a Saturday Night Live actor. Uh, it's kind of divisive. That was also definitely true of Soul Survivor. But even the people who don't care for it will say it has excellent special effects, and it wasn't successful either at the box office or with the genre fans. And I think the big thing is that it was a lot of the time just promoted as an action movie. But as an action movie, it's extremely dark. Even for a zombie movie, it's dark. The whole setup is that there's a police officer who's killed and then brought to life as a zombie while he's investigating a company that's bringing criminals back to life or just regular people as zombies. And this is another one where the idea is that the zombies can be controlled. How much they can be controlled is really ambiguous, and there's some creative twists on that. And the bottom line is that the people brought back to life uh, are reanimated with an imperfect technology, and all the ones we see sooner or later will just not only die but disintegrate. And that leads to some graphic effects. Uh, and that's one more thing about this. It's extremely gory and violent for an action movie, but for a zombie movie, they actually don't go that far, at least apart from the disintegrating zombies. And I think that actually failed to connect with the people who would have liked really gory zombie movies like the spaghetti zombies, like Zombie itself. Still, it's a very interesting movie, and if you can get into it, it really is funny. You just have to have a really, really dark sense of humor. And here's one I was definitely going to include. Uh, yes, I believe I have this in order. I think it was made at the same time as another I'll get to next. This is called The Boneyard. It's another one that's kind of a zombie parody, but they come closer to playing it straight. It and it's a really like Dead Heat, a mashup between a zombie movie and a police procedural. So you start with the police discovering that an undertaker has been keeping the bodies of three children, or they think they're children initially, and having other bodies that are partially dismembered. And they bring in a woman who's a police psychic. Here, that's played completely straight, and they actually show her being traumatized. So, what it turns out is that the three children are these ghouls that are extremely hard to kill. They're called Kiyoshi, and about all we see about them is that they can only be killed by either being completely dismembered, having their torso crushed, or being just blown to pieces. And uh, what they definitely questionably did was making their advertising thing a poodle that gets zombified and turned into a huge creature. But the actual ghouls are the real centerpiece of the movie, and they are incredibly creepy. And this is the other thing, common denominator. They're definitely smart, though it's a little unclear how smart they are, just because there's things they do that might or might not be intentional. The best moment, one of them has a doll, so it sticks out the doll like it's letting the doll take a look around before it goes around a corner. So as long as these ghouls in the screen, they're called Kiyoshi, which is a Japanese word, but it doesn't really mean anything. This is extremely effective and actually scary. Of course, then you get the poodle and the human character who gets turned into a zombie. For these, the effects weren't that good. Uh, they're still okay. And with the poodle, especially, they obviously got a lot less serious. But most of the film is not like that. There's really about an hour before any of the zombie action happens, and that's a lot of dialogue and character development of characters who are interesting. And then the other thing about this, you could almost compare it to Die Hard. It's set in the police morgue, and when the ghouls come out, the whole setup from there is that everyone is trapped in this very confined environment with a whole bunch of dead bodies that don't come to life, that is something else that makes it different and really a lot creepier. So this is definitely worth watching. For a while, it was hard to get. This DVD got expensive for a while. Now there's been a Blu-ray release out for a few years, and it's really been out on YouTube all along. That was how I first watched it. Now this is another one. I believe it was dated 1989. Yes, Chopper Chicks in Zombietown. It's another zombie parody, and I'm getting close to when I want to wrap this up, so I won't say a lot about this. Uh, it's one of the later zombie movie parodies, and you can argue more about how well it's done. The whole setup is that you have these biker characters who are just either biker stereotypes or general female stereotypes. There's a single mother. There's an actual LGBT character who's very vocal about being LGBT. And there's kind of a naive biker who, for a while, just isn't saying anything. But towards the end, it gets a little more serious, and with the zombies out, it gets a lot more creative. A lot of what the zombies do is set up as slapstick, but it's actually very complex behavior. You see one that just sets up its own butcher shop. You see a zombie that investigates a grenade, though it then tries to eat the grenade. And this is another one that has a zombie master. The plot is that there's a mad scientist. It's played by a guy named Don Caffa, who was also in Return of the Living Dead, uh, who brought them back to life. And he seems to be able to control them, but it's limited control, like they'll follow his orders. But if he isn't around, they'll just wander off and start eating people. The most psychotic scene in this movie, the mad scientist actually grabs a wheelbarrow full of guns, rolls it out, and tries to teach the zombies how to use the guns. So if you can get into that kind of movie, if that sounds interesting, this is worth your time. And here's one more. I'm actually skipping over one or two I had. Splinter. Now, this is a very late zombie movie. It's from 2008, which, of course, is a time ago now, but much later than anything else I've covered. This, I think, could be the best modern zombie movie. It's kind of an homage to Night of the Living Dead that's even more minimal. There's criminals who abduct a couple, carjack them. They go to a gas station, and the gas station gets besieged by zombies that are animated by this organism that looks like splinters. And there's lots of shots of both the splinters and the undead. This is just very brutal body horror. A gay guy put up talking about this. Silly splinter zombies. Knees don't bend that way. And if there's anything that doesn't work, it's almost a little too polished. The actors are good, but then the script just kind of makes them a little, if not stereotyped, still archetypal. Though uh, it's well acted, so you can't argue that they aren't sympathetic. Even with the criminal, he is played by the biggest name actor. His name's Shea Wiggum. He was in Kong Skull Island. So he alone makes it feel more mainstream than it really is. Still, with the zombies themselves, they really don't have any weakness. The splinters can bring them back to life, whether it's whole bodies, parts of bodies, or later on we see the splinter organism assembling pieces of multiple bodies into something bigger, which is really freaky to watch. Though since it's a modern movie, you really don't get that good a look at it, at the creatures a lot of the time. Bottom line, this is very much top-notch zombie movie, and it's not that hard to get. So definitely watch this if you're going to try any new zombie movie for Halloween. And that'll be enough for now. I'll be doing more talking about zombie movies, really looking at higher and lower tiers. So I'll be getting to that. For now, I'm signing off. Yes, but I'll definitely be back.